We're starting the Maamar Vayehi Miketz. There are two Maamorim Vayehi Miketz in Torah Or. The first one we learned years ago, and today we're learning the second one. They're very, very different Maamorim. And the first thing I want to say is that I'm going to do something now which I've either never done or almost never done. And that is, we're not going to learn this Maamar in order. We're going to learn the beginning and the end tonight, with Hashem's help, till line 49, and then beginning with line 149, we'll do tonight. And next week, I hope to finish it in one more week. We'll see how it goes. We'll do the middle of the Maamar. I'm doing it this way. It's just so much easier to understand what's transpiring. Tonight we'll do the Maamar, and next week we'll do what is called in some areas of the Chabad culture the biur on the Maamar. The Maamar in general, and particularly the middle of the Maamar, the part that we're not doing tonight, that we're going to do next week, is similar to the Gersa Kedish and Kuntas Acharin in Tanya. Zemiris hayu lichukecha beveis mugure. David's miris kadis lahu, which discusses the fact that David HaMelech referred to the Torah as miris, and there's two aspects to what that means. One aspect is that learning Torah gave him pleasure, and the other aspect is that it cut off, it destroyed, it was mezamer aritzim, his opponents. And the Gemara says David HaMelech was punished for it, and that the nature of the punishment was that he forgot the mitzvah saseh of bakosef yiso, which means in very, very short, that the Aron HaKodesh has no panim and acher, it's kulei panim, like the Luchas Abris are kulei panim, right? As I've told you many times, Torah Shabbat Peh is kulei acher, the Sefer Torah is panim and acher, and the Luchas Abris are kulei panim. And the Aron HaKodesh, which carries the Luchas Abris, is also kulei panim, which is why the Aron HaKodesh must be carried with the people, the Leviim or the Chanin, carrying the Aron, facing it. They're faced to the Aron. And instead they put it, of course, in a wagon, and then you had the mice with Peretz Be'uza, and so on. And the Gemara says David HaMelech was punished that he forgot this halacha, that bakosef yiso. And the Alter Rebbe explains that because David HaMelech made an ikir out of chitzenius HaTorah, and he overlooked the pnimius HaTorah, he was punished that he should forget the inyan of pnimius Elikus and get caught up in the chitzenius of Elikus, which led to the tragedy of Peretz Be'uza. And that's what Alter Rebbe discusses in that Kuntas Acharin, and that is more or less the discussion in the middle of this Maamar, which we're going to be doing next week. Bli neder, mitzvah Hashem. Ube'ezer Hashem Yisbarach. Tonight we're going to do the beginning and the end. It's a fascinating Maamar, because it's an analysis of a pasuk, or two psukim, or three psukim. It studies the psukim at the beginning of Parshas Mikeitz. That the Parsha begins, as the Maamar begins, Vayehi Miketz Shnosayim Yomim, it was at the ends of 2 years. Shnosayim means 2 years of days. Ufare Cholim, the Pharaoh has a dream. He's standing on the Yoed. It means the river the Nile, or the various tributaries that came from the river the Nile, the canals that carry the water to irrigate the valley of Egypt at that time. The next pasuk says, from this river came 7 cows, and they were beautiful, and they were fat, and they were rich, and they were sitting and grazing. Then it says, there were 7 additional cows which emerged from the water that were emaciated, and so on, and then they swallowed them. So this Maamar is analyzing these psukim and explaining them in an incredibly esoteric way, very, very mystically. In other words, the Torah is arucha me'eretz mida rachave min hayam. All of us know this. Torah is infinite. And the Rebbe said often the infinity of Torah is not in halacha, it's not in nigle, because halacha the Torah is fixed, it's limited, there's so many halachas. The infinity of Torah is inside, is in pnimius HaTorah. Or as the Rebbe used to quote from the Alter Rebbe, Reiv Seides HaTorah Gduzim Ba'agodes. The infinity of Torah is in the Agoda, in the various different ways of interpreting the Torah beyond the halacha and the pshat. And you can read the same pasuk 100 times, you can have 100 different meanings. And these psukim, Vayehi Miketz Shnosayim Yomim Farei Chelim, has various interpretations and a variety of levels. And of course, the key term in the sequence is the word chaylim. Pari is dreaming. And there's a huge mysticism, a huge chassidus about the meaning and the significance of a dream and of dreams and how it ties into the story of Golus and so on. As we know, all of the significant events associated with the Golus appear in the Torah in the form of a variety of dreams. You have the dreams of Yosef, you have the dreams of the Sarah Mashker and Sarah Eifim, the dreams of Pare, and so forth. Our Maimon is going to also give us a non-literal, a non-pshat interpretation of these psukim, but it's an incredibly esoteric one. It's incredibly refined, a very high level of mystical interpretation. And again, the key is going to be the word chaloim, but the code to this Maimir, as opposed to many other Maimorim on these psukim, instead of the word chaloim meaning a dream, the word chaloim is going to mean chaylim, a nekuda, the vowel chaylim, which is a dot on top of a letter. And the Maimir is going to revolve around this idea of pare chaylim. That pare is in a madrege. We'll talk about all of these things, of course, in the class. But at the outset, I just want to underscore, we're going to translate the word chaylim not from the word dream, but from the nikud, from the vowel of a nekuda, of a dot on top of a letter, which is chaylim. Now, there are other Maimorim where this is also discussed in Maimon Ein Ches Taka of this Parsha, Tafresh Ein Ches, where he talks about chaylim also. No, that's in Vayehi. That's in Vayehi. Vayehi Tafresh Ein Ches. I can't remember the Dibur Maschal at the moment, but you could look it up. There's only one Maimir. And over there's a huge discussion with the letter, the difference between the kudus, vowels that are on top of the letters, like toy, for example, or the nekudas that are in the middle of vowels, like tuv, if you write with a shuruk, or if the letters are beneath the vowels, like tuv, if you make it with a malupam. And there's a whole discussion in that Maimir about the difference whether the nekudas are under the letters, in the middle of the letters, on top of the letters. And in that sequence, the chaylim, which is on top of the letter, is actually seen as advantageous in Tafresh Ein Ches. Here, the chaylim, though it's on top of the letter, is going to be seen as disadvantageous. Why? I'll tell it to you now. Because what the Rebbe is going to reveal in this Maimir is that there's 4 levels of Torah. The lowest level of Torah is the oisius, the words and the letters, which are 2-dimensional, right? They're called merubois, they have a length and a breadth. Above them is the nekudis, is the vowels. The nekudis, as we know, are not written into the Sefer Torah, but they're pronounced when the Sefer Torah is being read. There's no way to say the words of Torah without having specific enunciations for each one of the consonants, each one of the oisies, each one of the syllables. And as a consequence, there has to be vowels, has to be nikudes in the utterance of the words of the Sefer Torah. But they're not written in the Sefer Torah. The level above that would be tagim. Tagim means the crowns, the ksadim of the Yossi, which are written in the Sefer Torah, but they're represented by 1-dimensional lines as opposed to Yossi Merubais. As I'm talking, I'm realizing that I'm saying it wrong. The lowest level of Yossi, the second letter is the crowns because they're written there in 1-dimensional lines. The third level is Nekudas. But the highest level is Taimim. Taimim literally means the musical notes, the trop, the melody. But of course in Chassidus, there's a huge issue made out of Taimim, and the bottom line is that it's called the Tainuk, the delight, the pleasure of the Torah. So the Oisies of the Torah and the Tagim of the Torah exist physically. The Nekudis are not written there, they're the secret behind the written words, but the Taimim are even higher. So the code to this Maamar Vayehi Miketz, which is all wonderful stuff, it's going to be very glorious, very lofty, very high. But the fact that Pare is only in the Madrega of Chaylim, meaning to say Nukudes, the vowel Chaylim, which is above the Us and above the Tag, but it's not the Tam, is the beginning of all kinds of tzaras. That's going to be the reading of this pasuk. So the constant is going to be that in this Parsha, we're describing something ill, not ideal. Something is wrong, but it's happening on an incredibly ideal level. Because as you'll see in the Maimar, how we translate Vayehi Miketz Shnasayim Yomim, how we translate the word Pare, how we translate the word Yo'ed, how we translate the word Omed Ala Yo'ed, the Sheva Paras HaTevet, Sheva Paras HaRois. The key to the Maimar is that Pare Chaylam, that rather than Pare, whatever the word Pare means, being connected to the deepest level of the Torah, what's called Taimei Torah, that even though Chaylam is an akuda, which is above the letters, which makes it superior to other nekudas that are in the letters or beneath the letters and so on. But it's only the nikud, and it's not the timing. And because para is only holding in the madrega of chaylim, which is the third level, it's a very high level, it's higher than Isis, it's higher than Tagum. But because it's not yet the timing, therefore all kinds of stuff are going to devolve from it, because Pari is only holding in the Madrega of Chaloim and is not holding the Madrega of Taimim. In other words, and I guess this is a bit of the pshat in the Maimer, as a precursor to the Maimer. The psukim at the beginning of Parshas Mikeitz talk about Chaloim, dreams. Dreams can be understood on various levels, and in each case, a dream is considered a deficiency. This Maimer is going to talk about Chaloim at an incredibly high level. But no matter how high a level Chaloim will be discussed on, it's still Chaloim, meaning it's still a deficiency. But this deficiency is very, very, very subtle, and it brings about a very, very subtle ill, but that subtle ill devolves into grosser and grosser ills. And to use an example which is found in Chassidus often, we find that in Chassidus they point out that the word chayla, ches vav lamed hey, which means a sick person, is begematria mem tes, has the numerical equivalent to 49. So the Rabbi brings us in many Maimorim, including of course in the Maamar Vayehi Miketz, that 49 is one less than 50. Chamishim Sharei Bina, the 50 gates of wisdom, of understanding, is the Tachas HaShleimus. Shara Chamishim is Atik, Nesiv Le'edoi Ha'ayit, and so on. The Nesiv Le'edoi is connected to Chochmah, not the Bina. But the Shara Chamishim Bina, whoever that is, the fact that you're missing one shar means that that's the beginning of what can eventually devolve into sickness. And the same is true here. The fact that Para, even though our Maimer is going to explain Para as being something very lofty, the fact that it could be more lofty, and he's, quote, only, end quote, on the level of Chaloim, meaning the Kudus above Asias, as opposed to Taimim, that becomes the beginning of all the negativity which will follow subsequently, that are going to be represented in these psukim, as the Alter Rebbe is going to explain them in the Maimer Mitzvah. So the way I want you to approach this class is that we're going to learn a Maimer of the Alter Rebbe, where the Alter Rebbe is going to explain to us psukim in the Torah on a very pneumistic level. And first of all, enjoy hava geshmak and pneumius HaTorah. Enjoy this dimension. Take in how when you look deeper into the Torah, you see more and more and higher, and there's an enormous amount of beauty and richness, and as one of my friends often would use the word, and creativity in this variety of different interpretations. And then of course there's also always the lesson that we can learn from all of these things in our practical lives and in our daily lives, which comes afterwards. So let us begin the Maimer proper. The pasuk says, it was Miketz Nasayim Yom, at the end of 2 years. We all know the story. Yossi sat in jail for 10 years. The Sarah Mashke, Sarah Ephraim joined him, and he sat another year. And when they departed, Yosef asked the Sarah Mashke to intercede on his behalf. It was considered for Yosef HaTzadik a flaw, and he sat 2 more years. Nastamini Gosh Nasayim Yom. The Pari has a dream. He's standing on the river. Now let me continue. From the river emerged 7 cows that are Yefes Mare, they're rich and they're beautiful. And they graze on the shrubberies, on the grass which sits at the edge of the river. And then there's 7 additional cows go up, which are very emaciated and so on. And then the end of the story is Vativlano. That the 7 emaciated cows swallow up the rich cows, the fat cows, the blessed cows, and right, when the Pharaoh repeats the story, that's what he adds. You couldn't at all see the evidence of this incredible cataclysm where these fat cows are swallowed up by the thin cows, and the thin cows remain thin. It's a story in the Torah. And of course, the story in the Torah, as it happened in Mitzrayim, was the dream the Pharaoh had, which Yossi would then interpret, which would affect the whole world and the whole history of the Jewish people. We're going to learn the same story, but on a much, much higher level. And here's how it goes. The Pasuk says in Rus, V'zois is Lefanim B'Yisrael. Now the literal translation of the word Lefanim B'Yisrael means is our past, our history. Lefanim B'Yisrael, since time immemorial, it's been this way. But here the translation of the word Lefanim B'Yisrael is, this is the pnimius of a Yid. If you look at a Jew and you get past the chitzonius, lefonim to the pnimius of a Yid, what are you going to find inside a Yid? V'zeis. Says the Rebbe, v'ein zeis ala Torah. Zeis means the Torah. The pnimius of a Yid is the Torah. In other words, when anybody learns any word in the Torah not only speaks to the Jew, it speaks about the Jew. It speaks of the Jew. We were raised in the culture of the Rebbe, that the Rebbe's culture is Torah milashen heirah. The Torah teaches us lessons. But in addition to the Torah milashen heirah, there's also the idea of Maisa of Siman Labanim and other things like that. In this case, it's Zeis HaTorah Adam. Every word of Torah describes a Yid. Kihine, Zeis HaTorah. Zeis is a reference to the Torah. Like the Pasuk says Zeis HaTorah. And since it also says Zeis Lefanim B'Yisrael, we know that Yeshnam B'Pchinas Pnimius Shekol Nefesh B'Yisrael. The Pnimius, the inner dimension, the behind the surface of every Jew is Torah. And therefore, when you learn a pasuk in the Torah, one of the various different interpretations of that pasuk is, this pasuk is describing Yidden. And this pasuk, Vayehi Miketz Shasayim Yom Farei Chelim, V'hine Eimet Ala Yed, and all the rest, is describing Yidden, taka at a very, very high level, but at the same time there's a certain flaw, as is represented by the word chaloim, which sets up all that's going to transpire as a consequence, subsequently. But the point is, we're going to be reading these psukim as they're describing what's happening by Yid. It says the Rebbe on line 7, Ki Eshechol Nefesh, every single Yiddish neshama has Bechinas Pnimius or Bechinas Chitzenius, an inner dimension and an outer dimension. Now by Pashtus, this means the inner dimension of a Yid is the Torah. The outer dimension of the Yid is the person that you see. The Hainu, this means Bechinas Sosam V'Gala, mysterious and secret level, and an exposed and revealed and an obvious level. Shakmei Shakadosh Baruch Hu Shekucha B'Richu Sosam V'Gala, Isaiah says Kucha B'Richu exists on various levels. A hidden level and a revealed level. Kachei Raisa, Torah also has a hidden level and a revealed level. And the Alter Rebbe concludes V'Kach Yisrael. Yidden also have a hidden level and a revealed level. And Bepashtus, the revealed level is the Yid as you see him. The Pnimius Dika level, the hidden level is the Yid as he's in the Torah, but more specifically, the idea of a Zeis, HaTorah Lefanim B'Yisrael, that the Pnimius of every Yid as Torah has itself a Pnimius and a Chitzenius. In as much as Yid as the Torah, there's an external level and an internal level. And our Maamar will attempt to explore both, explain the difference between them, and explain the struggle that goes on in terms of determining which of the two faces, which of the two madreges, should be primary in the life of a Yid. Says the Rebbe like this: what's the secret, mysterious level of a Yid? Which parallels secret, mysterious level of the Torah? So we're going to connect it to the Pasuk Vayehi Miketz, which is the Pasuk in the Torah. And the Pasuk Vayehi Miketz is somehow going to be connected to Pnimius HaTorah and Nigla the Torah, which is parallelly, correspondingly connected to the Nigla of a Yid and the Pnimius of a Yiddish neshama. So what's this? Pnimius Chabad, the inner intellect of the divine soul, which can't see and you can't understand. The depth of a Jew is what is Geshmai Kenu. It's depth, it's deep, it's mysterious, it's unknown, it's secret. It's beneath the surface. And of course the point is that it always remains beneath the surface. It's not it's beneath the surface because I don't know it. And when I'm going to discover it, I'm going to reveal it. No. We're not talking about Keseh, we're not talking about Ayah, we're talking about Chabad. The deepest level of a person, even in as much as it's a conscious level of the person, is Sasam. The mind of the person on the highest of levels is sealed away. And then you have Bechinas Gal, you have the revealed level of Bechinas Chitzenius Shabei, is Chitzenius, which is the outer level of the Torah, or the outer level of the Yiddish Neshamis, Shabei, which is in a Yid, Shehu Bechinas Ava V'Yid V'Chulu, which is the love and fear of God. Now right here, stop right there, right? Stop right there. Anybody who's learned Chassidus and explores the idea of a Pnimius of a Yid a pnimius of a neshama, and the chitzenius of a neshama encounters a variety of different ways of understanding pnimius and chitzenius. And one of them is, like you have in the Pasuk, and it's when the Chassidishe Hanestaris van Nigles. There's a Torah which all Jewish people share, which is the practical Torah, what we should do and what we shouldn't do. And then there is a Torah which is to each one of us individually, which is not about what we should and shouldn't do, but how we understand and how we feel and how we experience Yiddishkeit. Usually that's the separation between Pnimius and Chitzenius, where Galia Shavatera, Chitzenius is what we should do, and Pnimius is what we feel and what we understand. But in this Maimon it's different, because everything in this Maimon is different. Everything in this Maimon is a level higher. Pnimius is Seichel alone, and I'm going to add Nitztam Seichel, or Gadlas HaMeichen, the highest level of intellect. And Chitzenius is not only what the person does, but even what the person feels. Anything you see on the outside constitutes Chitzenius in this particular Maimon. So the Pasuk says, "V'zeis lefanim b'Yisrael." Inside every Yid is Torah, and the Torah also teaches us that Torah has a chitzenius and a pnimius, and correspondingly, a Yid has a chitzenius and a pnimius. The pnimius of a Yid, which is connected to the pnimius of the Torah, is Moichin Chabad, and the chitzenius of a Yid, which is connected to the chitzenius of Torah, is the Gili of Midas. V'lachein, says the Rebbe on line 11, therefore, Kameish yesh tanto. B'Teira, just like in Teira, there's 4 levels: Taimim, Nekudes, Tagim, ACAs, from the top to the bottom, the musical notes, the vowels, the crowns, and the letters. Of course, the letters are written 2-dimensionally. The crowns are written 1-dimensionally. The vowels are not written at all, but they're pronounced. And then you have the Taimim, the Trop, the Yishmak of Teira, which doesn't have to be mentioned altogether. So just like in Teira, you have 4 levels, and I'm going to go out on a limb and make a distinction. Of those 4 levels, only Taimim is real Pnimius, and Nekudes, Tagim, Oisius, all collectively constitute Chitzenius, even though compared to a different Maimer, Midas would be Pnimius and Mais would be Chitzenius, and this Maimer, only Moichin, is Pnimius and Midas is included in the Chitzenius. Says the Rebbe, Kach yesh b'china seila b'nefesh shalakis, the same is true in a Yiddish and Neshama. You have the Chitzenius of Yiddish and Neshama and the Pnimius of Yiddish and Neshama. The Chitzenius of Yiddish and Neshama is not just what the Neshama does, but what the Neshama feels. The Pnimius of Yiddish and Neshama is what the Neshama understands. The Lakama is going to explain later. So here we have a foundation of a Maimed. Foundation of Maimed is we're going to read these psukim and refer them to the Jewish people because v'zeis lefanim b'Yisrael. Specifically, we're going to refer them to the question of the Jewish people when it comes to the question of Pnimius and Chitzenius, the inner dimension of the Jew and the outer dimension of the Jew. The inner dimension of the Jew is going to be Taimim, and the outer dimension of the Jew is not just going to be the Oisius, and not just going to be the Tagim, it's going to be also the Nekudas. So we know what we're going to talk about. Okay, we talk about the Jewish people, and the fact that by the Jewish people there is a model that reflects the Torah, and there's a Pnimius and a Chitzenius. Says Rebbe Vehine, let's move on to point B. We explain the key point of this Maimer, that the Torah reflects in a Yid. A Yid reflects the Torah. Now the Rebbe says, there's another point I want to talk about, which is the word Pare. All of us know that there's a Pharaoh in Klipa. And we know from the Maimorim and the Sichas, the Pharaoh of Klipa is so powerful that Moshe Rabbeinu fears him. And that's what Eibush has to tell Moshe Rabbeinu, Be'al Pare, come with me to Pare, rather than Lechel Pare, go to Pare. Because Pare represents a high level of Klipa, and specifically Pare is the Makif of Klipa. So Pare is a very high Madrege. And because Pare is the Makif of Klipa, Moshe Rabbeinu actually fears him, because Moshe is quote unquote only the Pnimius Meichen Chabad. And the Eibush has to say, Be'al, come with you to Pare. Says the Rebbe, Kach, just like we understand the mysticism of Pare and Klipa, Yesh b'kedushas nefesh alekis, you have in the holiness of the divine soul the concept of Pare. So whatever a Chayla means, with all of its milas and all of its chesrenis, is connected to Pare. Vayigash explains to us what's the concept of Pare, and on line 13, the Rebbe quotes, it exposes and reveals all lights. Pare means to strip away a klipa, to remove a peel or a shell or a blockage and reveal what's going on underneath. Now, if this would be a different Maimed, and we'll be reading the very same words, and we would translate the word chalaim as a dream in the literal sense of the word, that chalaim is even from Golos, we will explain that Pari is klipa, but not in this Maimer. Because in this Maimer, chalaim doesn't mean a dream. Chalaim means a revelation of godliness. How high a revelation of godliness? Higher than the written Sefer Torah. It's not the Oises, it's not the Tagim, it's the Nekudas. But it's only chalaim, it's only Nekudas, it's not Taimim. And that's Parei Chelim. The beginning of all the tzaris is that high as the madrega of Parei of Kedusha. And chalaim may be, because it's not the highest madrega, therefore there could be chesreines at the end of the line. But this whole Maimer is beginning on a high madrega. Says the Rabbi on line 14, it all begins in the Parei of Kedusha, but it descends through a chain reaction of steps and levels, lamata mata, lower and lower still, until the physical Parei, who is a very powerful force of evil. That's in denial of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. The physical Parei says, I don't know Havai. If Moshe Rabbeinu comes to Parei and says, Kayam Elikim, or Kayam Elikenu, the Parei would have listened. Why? Because he knows what Elikim is. He knows what Elikenu is. And Moshe says, Havai, and Parei denies it. That's how low Parei falls. That he should be able to deny the God of the supernatural, the God of Shem Havaya. But where does it begin? It begins in this Parei of Kedusha, that it's, quote, only the Madrega of Chalaim, end quote, and not the Madrega of time. Nimshach beginnes Parei Atachne, the physical Parei She'oma, that he's able to say, Liadi I deny Shem Havaya. That the physical Parei, with all of his power, was such a big Rasha, that he was able to deny Shem Havaya. The possibility to deny Shem Havaya, which is the equivalent of denying Elakus, is based on the fact that you have forgetfulness. That it has its roots in the revealed world, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, which is Parei, the Gedusha Parei. But Parei has and holiness, that's why it's the source of Shikha. As the Pasuk says, Ragla Yerdes Mavis. Her feet, meaning the feet of Malchus, descend to a place of death. So Parei says Leia Daiti as Havaya, because the physical Parei is in a low madrega, but the source of the Leia Daiti as Havaya is in the Parei of Kedusha, on the highest madregas, that he's having a dream from the word Chaylim. What is wrong with Parei? What is wrong with Parei, that from Parei to the Kedusha, which is a very high level of holiness, you have a big, huge Parei of the Umazeh? So the Rebbe says, Hashikha hamishtalsheles mibechinas alma deizgalye Parei de Shebekdush. I just read line 15 and 16 again. We're going to learn this inside, obviously, but I'm going to say this now as a brief introduction. So we're talking about Parei Chaylim. There's something wrong with Parei Chaylim. But in this Maimer, whatever it is wrong with Parei Chaylim is very lofty. What is it? So the Rebbe's expression is Hamishtal Sheles mebechinas alma deizgalye Parei de Gedusha k'mesha klosov. This is line 16. Ragla Yerdes Mois or Ragla Yerdes Mavis. What's wrong with Parei is that he's revealed. That's it. Revealed is usually good, and of course, revealed is good to the recipient of the revelation. But to the revelation itself, it's a diminution. The beginning of understanding the chesaron of chalaim, the deficiency of the word chalaim, and of course, as I mentioned, the point is the nikud, the vowel. Specifically, the vowel is cholam as opposed to kametz or patach or tzeri. Our Maimer is not at all going to address the specific nikud, simply the fact that it's a nukuda as opposed to tam. And the beginning of the chalaim is Parei. What's Parei? Gili Elokus, revealing godliness. Now, what could possibly be wrong with revealing godliness? And the answer is the revelation of godliness is the beginning of the diminution of godliness, which ends with the concealment of godliness. Or said in other words, you have in Chassidus in V'yiraita Moskva and in Himshech Tzadik Daled, Klal Godel, a big klal, a big rule in Chassidus that says, Kol Gilu Lagabe Azulasu Hela Ma'atzmi. Anything which is revealed to another is always diminished. When you reveal to somebody else, and that somebody else gets it, it's less than what you have. You cannot reveal to somebody else, Kol Etzem, built in his Gala. So the Chesaron, which is the base, the foundation, the basis for all the Chesaronas that are going to follow, beginning with the word Chalaim, is Parei. Parei means revealed. Revealed is a good thing, but it's less than concealed. Or if you're going to go back to line 9 and 10 in the Maimer, it's Ava Vayira, it's the emotions of Elokus, which are lower than the Chabad of Elokus. Continues the Rebbe in line 17, Avo, the Parei, which is the source of Chaloim, is Giloi. What is higher than Giloi and therefore higher than the deficiency associated with Chaloim? Besom, Imen what's hidden from the eye, Alma discussed the concealed world. Habracha Mitsuya, blessing is present, Mimekera Brachas, from the source of all blessings. And if Parei would not be in a state of Giloi alone, which is going to lead to Chaloim, but he's going to be in a state of Samoy Min Ha'ayin, there's not going to be the Chesaron of Chaloim. That's basically how you read the Parsha. Because of Parei being on a very high level, but it's a high level of Giloi, it evolves into Chaloim, and what Chaloim evolves into later on. As the Pasuk says, as Schneur Chochma, that the place of wisdom is the place of tznius, of modesty, of hiddenness. Because Chochma is not just intellect, Chochma is Makam HaZikaron, a place of remembrance. What goes on Chochma, and of course the meaning of Zikaron is, you can't forget. As I've explained to you in our learning over the years, the physical reality is, the biological reality is, that nothing is ever lost. The human brain recalls every single thing that ever happened to it. No information, no data is ever lost. This is true, of course, in the human mind, and it's true in the universe at large. It's true in every piece of physical reality. But the ability to recall it, to access that knowledge, is called zikaron. The fact that the knowledge is dead, you cannot access it, is called shikha. So in the place of hiddenness, of concealment, or of depth, or of moichin, there's zikaron. Not only is the information always there, but you can always access it. In the place of Parei, which is the word Giloi, that's the beginning of Shikha. So, Parei is a very great thing, but there's something greater than it. And because, although Parei is a great thing, a revelation of godliness, like the Mides, but there is something greater than it, which is Davar Asamim Min Ha'ayin, we say this great thing is the beginning of the next Chesaron, which is Chaloim. And what's Chaloim? Nekudis, which are higher than Tagim and higher than Asias, but lower than Time. And now the Rebbe continues and develops this idea. Vehine, to be sure, when you describe Parei as being a place of revelation, and according to this Maimed, at least as I'm presenting it to you, the idea that Parei is associated with revelation is seen as a chsaron. Says Rabbi, you have to say, when you use the word revealed, you have to be talking about something that needs to be revealed. If it was first unknown and now it's known, it's revealed. If it's first hidden and then it's exposed and now it's revealed. In other words, Parei is revealing what before Parei was in a state of hiddenness. So there's almost a question written into these words. The question written into these words is, why should there be a deficiency? And the notion that Parei reveals, all Parei is revealing is this that was concealed before. And we'd established that tznius, chochma, zikaron, hiddenness is a positive thing. And somehow, although what is revealed is revealing what was earlier hidden, when it was in its hidden state, it was more ideal. It would not lead to chaloim, to nekudis, it would lead to taimim. And because the very thing which was earlier hidden is now being revealed, it results in chaloim. And he gives a very interesting pshat, the hine. So in other words, sometimes when you reveal what's hidden, it's the same as what's hidden, which is a good thing. In this case, when you reveal what's hidden, it's less than what's hidden, and that's why it's not such a good thing. And he brings the psukim that we know from the Bris Maimer, right? In Lubavitch, there's a Maimer that everyone says at a chasane, l'chadedi l'kraskal. There's a Maimer that everyone says at a bar mitzvah, tefillin Maryam Maksivahu, Isab Medrash Tilim. And then there's a Maimer that everyone says at a Bris, which is the last Maimer in Lech Lecha in Teira Eir, be'etzem hayom hazeh. And in that Maimer, it goes into the pasuk, Mi Yala Lanu Hashamayma. And if you can remember that pasuk, Rosh Tevis Mila, Mem Yud La Mi Yala Lanu Hashamayma, the first letters of those four words is Mem Yud La Matei, which is Mila. And the Sefer Tevis is Yud Kei Vav Kei. And in that Maimer, he explained that Mila is higher than Shei Bavaya. But not here. Here is the other way around. Here, Mila covers Shei Bavaya. In other words, in the Maimon, you say Shem Havaya is Gilui and Mila is higher than Gilui. Or to say it in other words, Shem Havaya is Hishtalshlus, is Chachma, Mila is Kesed. In this Maimon, Shem Havaya is Gilui Alakus, and Mila is preventing it from being revealed. And when you remove the Arla, it emerges. The Pasuk says, Mi Alalanu Hashamayim, who will ascend for us into the heavens, which is the Pasuk, of course, in Parshas Nitzavim. And it says that Rosh Tevis Mila. The abbreviations, the letters, the beginning of each word is Mila. The Sefer Tevis Havai, the last letters of each word is Shem Havaya. And although in the Maimer of Lech Lecha we made Mila higher than Shem Havaya, in this Maimer it's different. We wish for the light of godliness to reach us, and it should be in a state of revelation alone. We shouldn't only have the letters of Yud Kei Vav Kei, but we should have higher than the letters of Yud Kei Vav Kei. Now let's think for a moment. If you have 4 levels, the highest level is Taimim, the second level is Nekudis, the third level is Tagim, the fourth level of Isis. Isis is the lowest, Madrege. And you want to reveal something which is higher than level Isis, the depths of thought. Behizbonenus, muhus v'atzmus, in contemplating the essence of godliness. Ani avayaleshani, see that one should not just read the words, but should have an understanding and a sensitivity and an awareness of the idea of Havaya. And the idea that Havaya is leishanisi is beyond change. Shikova b'meiche v'libe, that it should be fixed in a person's mind and in a person's heart. Godliness, meaning to say, we shouldn't just have the letters of the Torah, which is the fourth, the lowest level of the Torah, which is the source of the mitzvahs and halachas, which we do physically. But we should also have pnimius HaTorah, the neshama of the Torah, which gives us the depth of Elokus, the understanding of Elokus, the feeling for Elokus. Says the Rebbe, shehu b'chinas miyalalanu hashamayma. These are higher levels of the Torah. Not the Torah as it is down here on this earth, where it's only Asius. But Torah as it is Hashamayma in the heavens, and the heavens goes on Zon, it goes on Bina, it goes on Chochmah, and so forth and so on. That not just you should know practically what mitzvahs are, and do them, as represented by the Asius alone. We should have the Pnimius HaTorah, which is called Hashamayma, which is represented by either Nekudes, and higher than the Kudus, by Taimim, or lower than the Kudus, by Tagim. These are all levels of Pnimius HaTorah. So the Pasuk says, if you want to reveal the Shem Havaya, which is in Hashamayma, you have to first have Mila. So the Mila is removing a blockage. So it's not the taj that the Mila is higher than Shem Havaya, but the Mila is allowing the exposure of Shem Havaya. The way the Torah was given to us, all we have is Oisies. And when you do a bris, you remove the blockage and you're able to see the Elokus, which is hidden behind the blockage. So Mila itself is not above Havaya, it's a facilitator for the revelation of Shem Havaya. All of us know there's a concept of a wall, of a metaphysical, of a mystical wall, which separates between a person and his own godliness. And in general, what separates between a person and his own godliness? Avene seichem, your sins. And of course, we all know that oven can mean even chet melashon chesara, the most subtle and nuanced level of deficiency and inexactitude. And avene seichem avdilim, whether it's a gross aveda or the most theoretical beginnings of what will, through much hishtalshus, brings to an aveda, it's a havdalah. And the obstacles must be removed. And the Rebbe says, just like it's true l'mayla, it's true in Aveda, you have to circumcise, you have to take away, you have to remove the arla, the blockage to the lave, to be able to be revealed. And of course, when you redo a mila, and you reveal Shem Havaya, you know what that's called? That's called parei. Revealing what's concealed, not just the Asius, but the Nekudas and the Taimim. Continues the Rebbe and he makes a distinction. Line 26. However, when you remove the blockage, and as a consequence of removing the blockage, you're revealing godliness as represented by the word parei, which is on one level a very good thing. But we're somehow deciding that revealing godliness is somehow the beginning of something which is not so desirable. Says the Rebbe, Yesh bechinas priya. There's a need for another removal of a blockage, which is called priya. Shu dak. There's a thicker skin, and then there's a finer membrane that needs to be removed. Hamachasa v'chayf, which also blocks and also hovers. And in avoidav hu bechinas taivas. The thick arla which has to be removed is sin. The thinner skin is not sin, but material preoccupation, indulgence of material pleasures, gashmim, shemeklipas nega, that only come from the klipa of nega, shulavarim shal hete, which are things which are permitted, but they too are hamachasim umastirim enavaya, black and white. And in order to affect a true hashamayma, that the Yiddishkeit that we practice should not just be oisius, which means that we should know what to do and what not to do, but that it should involve also the pnimius of Elokus, which is Shem Havaya. You have to do a mila and a priya to remove one blockage, and a second blockage that the godliness should be revealed. So just now we described a very high level. The idea that there is the chitzenius of Teda, which is Asias, and the pnimius of Teda, which is the Sogan Elokus. And in the Sogan Elokus, there's different madreges which are exposed by revealing the mila, the orla hagasa, and the priya, the orla hadako, and then you're able to reveal the pnimius levels of the neshama. The Rabbi says is another example for this, and a much lower madreg afil, when you want to reveal the level of the malachim, which are a chariot for Elokus, which is much, much lower than the madreg of pare, which we're describing earlier, which are lower level of relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But they're also part, of pnimius as opposed to chitzenius, because they involve not just what to do and what not to do, namely oisius, but they also involve the feelings for lakus. But in this case, it's the madrega of teva, which is elam hayetira. He niksiv, the pasuk says, ve'erev v'geim v'techa kein chashmal v'chol. Chashmal is a screen, is a blockage. And the Torah says, in order to have Ava Yira Ve'elama Yetzira, you have to remove the blockage of Chashmal. So even to access a level of Pnimius associated with the Madrega Malachim, which is Beklalos Ve'elama Yetzira, there is a blockage, a Chashmal, a wall, and you have to do a Mila to remove that wall and expose the Shem Havaya. Chashmal Umitecha Demuzdal Chaisacholu. In the Bible we learned earlier this year, Tafshanayin Zayin, we spent a lot of time explaining Chashmal, so I'm not going to do it now. The bottom line is Chashmal is the equivalent of a orla. And when it's removed, you magala lakus. So if it's true to reveal the pnimius of Yiddishkeit and the madrega of Elam HaYetzir, of Ava Yidativ, you have to amil and remove the lavush of Chashmal to reveal much higher levels of godliness, the godliness of Shem Havaya. And the pnimius of Shem Havaya, you have to do a mila and a priya to remove the blockages. Practically, how are the blockages removed? It's masha'im, and we say in davening menafshi ka'afal akel tihi, it's through bittul. When a person's will, when a person's spirit is like dust in the presence of everybody else, that humility and that his batlos is the removal of the klipa hagasa and the klipa hadaka to reveal Elokus. And pari is asias ha'ofer, herstamaiseh. When was the last time pari represented ofer bittul? We always have pari representing ha'irif, the back of the neck, because pari is klipa, not in this maimer. Because this maimer, pari is still a bad guy. In other words, pari is still not the highest level. But pari's deficiencies, as they say in Yiddish, of all Yidden Gezagavan. What's the problem with pari? He's gili alakus, as if gili alakus is a problem. And the basis, the beginning of the gili alakus associated with pari is the fact that pari is the same letter as the word ha'afa, dust, earth. Shaydei ze yuchalias bechinas pari, which allows for the revelation of the godliness the bittul brings to the gili of the pnimius. You remove the orla hagasa v'adaka and reveal alakus. Sheifra v'yagala michsa she'alav, it exposes and reveals the covering which is on top of it. It says in the pasuk, "Paras reisha isha." By Seita, the Torah describes removing the covering of her head. And in the case of a Seita, that's not considered a desirable thing. But in Ruchnius, Lamaila Priya, removing a blockage and revealing godliness is a very, very favorable thing. So if Pare in this Maimer is such a lofty thing, so Pare in the Parsha of Seita is also a lofty thing. So what's the Taichu Paras Reisha Isha Lamad Yusa? Right, and as you all know, that the Sa'ar Be'isha Erva is a pasuk in Chumash, right? We all know that all halachas of tznius, parts of the body that need to be covered, mitzat tznius. But the only part of the body that needs to be covered, that the Torah explicitly says has to be covered, is the hair. Because since by a Seita, the Torah says to remove the hair covering, is a raya that by a woman who's modest, the covering has to remain on. So in the case of a Saita, we're speaking about it on a very low level. Since in our Maimer, everything is being understood on a very lofty level, what's the Taicha Paras Reisha Isha on the highest Madreges? Translates the Rebbe on line 35. The Knesset Yisrael Nikroim Isha Yiras Havaya. The Jewish people are called a woman who's God-fearing. Now, why would you take off her covering? If you want to uncover Eitze Shel Yiras Shamayim, the treasure, fear of God. It's one of the greatest gifts the Eibusher gave human beings. You reveal it. How are they? Through being dust. So the word Uparas Reisha Isha is read doubly. To reveal the head, the Yiras Hashem of Isha, of Knesset Yisrael, you have to have para from the word bittul, offer, which causes Uparas Reisha Isha to reveal the madrega of Eitzer Shal Yiras Shamayim. By days that through this is battle Yikra Masach Shalav, you tear away, you rip away the screen. Shunim Shachta, the source of the screen is Bechinas Gasas Aruach, from holiness, from arrogance, Shemach, Mas Gasas Ruchei, should because of his arrogance, Shemach, Shavis Atzmei Leyesh, V'dabu V'fnei Atzmei, one considers himself independent of Melakus, an entity unto himself, which is the source of all of the challenges in a person's life. When a person lacks bittul to lakus and bittul to his purpose, he's so busy with himself. And as a consequence of that, besides for the fact that he's lacking humility vis-a-vis HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he is going to be poor in Yiddishkeit. In other words, hu mit'av et taive, he lusts for all kinds of lust, v'chafetz, and he wishes. Who? Whatever he wants should be carried out because he's so self-centric, he's so important with himself. But when a person affects offer, which is ACS para, ACS pare, that's the basis for revealing the pnimius of a yid. And what's the pnimius of a yid? The pnimius of a yid is not yeshus and kaiva. The pnimius of a yid is yiras shamayim. V'tzarechu levatesh kasas ruchim, to break the gaiva. So, there is a klipa that needs to be removed. And when you remove the klipa, you're magala elakus, which is a wonderful thing. But somehow, even when you do this act of bittul and you're revealing a lakus, there's different levels. There's a lower level and a higher level. The lower level is worse. It's not so good. The higher level is better. But let's keep reading. Line 40. The Rabbi says like this. Just like we explained that ha'afar brings to upara, pare. That pare means to reveal a hidden godliness. In other words, hashamayma should be revealed through milah. You want to reveal the godliness, the havaya, by removing the blockage. And revealing is a good thing. And you reveal through bittul. So just like a person can self-bittul to reveal his pnimius, says the Rebbe, al derech zehu yisuri elamazah, the suffering in this life is for the same purpose. Haboyim lodin, which come to a person, the Alter Rebbe makes a statement, kilei machmas einish. It's not because Hashem is punishing that einiroi leishe v'shalvas elamazah. Is he unworthy of sitting in the serenity of this life? In other words, don't think for a second that suffering can be justified as punishment. Not true, inadequate, inconsistent, doesn't make sense. We find with Nebuchadnezzar, who was a Rasha Merusha. The Befil Shalach Gimel Psiesach where the Shemiz Baruch, he made 3 steps in the HaKadosh Baruch Hu Paskol Meluch Al Kol Ha'elam. He was merited to be a king over the entire world. Abishal Bekipa. Well, Azari Acharav and his descendants after him ad Gimel Derez for 3 generations. So the Alter Rebbe says, if Nebuchadnezzar merited 3 generations of kingship over the whole world for making 3 steps for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how much better than Nebuchadnezzar is every Yid? There's not a Jew alive who ever lived who did not honor HaKadosh Baruch Hu at least as much. And as a consequence, that Yid, every Yid, is worthy of all the good of this life. And don't tell me a Maisa with Einish. So the question becomes, if a Yid deserves so much Char Nilam Hazer, why do Yidden suffer? And the answer is, Allah Yesudim Boyim, the reason for Yesudim is not as a punishment, but as a refinement. Levat, they just them to beat the person. Lachniye, to subdue him. Ulahashmel Gasas Ruche, to lower his gross spirit. Ukmei, Shamar Razal, as the Gemara says, Tevim, Madras Achas V'chulu. Shekish Ein of Reyes, when one's eyes see. She assured in Boyim, I love that he's being challenged, that life is hard. Nishbal Daite, he's humbled. V'nasa Nich, and he becomes subdued in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which of course is one of the explanations for why we fast. The Rambam writes, fasting is not for suffering. Fasting is contrition. Fasting is tshuva, because when a person is vulnerable, he returns to his maker. So the Yisura make a person become closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the Alter Rebbe finishes on line 46, Vu Yokar B'nei Avad, that's very precious to the Eibishter, Li'es Ayedei Zeh, because these Yisurim affect, Bechinas es Galas, Bechinas Pari, Min Ha'ofar. Offer is the bittel, or the Yisurim, and it brings about the Pari, the Gili Elikus. So the spirit of this Maimed is that there's something called Oisius. That's the Torah the Eibishter gave us on the lowest madrei. But that's not enough. You want to reveal the heaven. You want to reveal Havaya, which is higher than the Oisius. You have to have a pari. You have to have a milah, remove the obstacles, because through the union of Ha'ofar. So our Maimed is describing pari as Pnimiyas HaTorah, right? Our Maimed is describing Pari as revealing the concealed dimensions. The revealed dimension is only Oisius. And Pari is the exposure of the Pnimius of the Neshamis Yisrael, Novelakus, which is higher than Oisius through a Priya and a Mil, by removing the obstacles. Continues the Rebbe and he says, V'hine, B'teira yesh bechinas tante, in the Teira there's 4 madregas. Taima means the musical notes, the melody. Nekudas means the vowels. Neither of these are written in the physical parchment of a Sefer Torah. Tagim means the crowns, which are written in 1 dimension. And Oisius means the letters, which are written in 2 dimensions. Says the Rabbi Bachin, as Taimim Shebetera Shabal Peh, even in the oral Torah. There is also Taimim, there's also the melodies, Kumesha Kosov of Alayla Shira Imi. That at night, and the night is relegated for learning Torah Shabal Peh, the Eibishter has a song. And it's written Shira with a Hey, which is feminine, and it's pronounced Shiroi with a Vav, which is masculine. Shebechinas Hashira v'Ataimim, Shebechinas Hanigin Imi. That the melodies that we sing at night and we're learning Teresh Balpez, Imi is close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So there's Taimei Torah, and I'm going to now speak into this discussion the point that I made initially, and there's Nekudes HaTorah. So when you say that Pari is a gili of the Pnimius of Elokus, of the Torah. Pari is a gili of the Pnimius of Elokus of the Neshamas Yisrael. It could be on various levels. It could be at the level of Tagim, it could be at the level of Nekudes, and it could be at the level of Taimim, which is the highest of all. The beginning of all of the Tzares is Pari Chelam, that you're revealing godliness, but only at the level of Nekudes, not at the level of Taimim. And you have to say Pshat, the following. Sometimes the revelation reveals the essence without diminishing it. That would be Taimei Torah. And sometimes the revelation conceals the essence and reveals something a little bit less superficial. And in the language of this Maimah would be the Nekudas, which are hard in the Tagim and the Oisius. And that's the Parsha here. Vayehi Miketz Shnasayim Yamim Ufare. Whatever Shnasayim Yamim means, but it brings to Pare. Godliness, Pnimis is being revealed. But it's only the Pnimius which is being revealed at the level of Chalayim. That's the problem. Because if it would be Pari and not Chalayim, but Taimim, then it wouldn't have all the subsequent ill effects which we're going to be learning about soon. I think that was quite clear. So I only read to line 48. 49 I'm going to leave for next week, and I want you to go all the way to line 149, and we're going to pick it up. V'hine. Ayedei bechina simcha v'tainug hazeh. Now let me, I skipped the whole beer, right? I have to sort of fill you in on 100 lines of Maimer, which I skipped. What we're exploring is Chitzonius HaTorah, which we're calling Oisius, versus Pnimius HaTorah, which is Tagim, which is Nekudas, and which is Taimim. And there's a difference between one level of Pnimius and another level of Pnimius. And the argument is, if the level of Pnimius which is revealed is Taimim, it's perfect, smooth as a whistle. But if the level of Pnimius which is revealed is Nekudas, which is also an incredibly high level, it reveals godliness on a very, very high level, but it's not yet Taimim. This can be the basis for all kinds of chesaron down the road. What's the Nekudas HaDavar? The Nekudas HaDavar here, the Torah has many levels. The difference between one level of the Torah and another level of Torah is the way it relates to the world. Oisius relates to the world on one level, Tagim relates to the world on a second level, Nekudas relates to the world on a third level. But Taimim is godliness that does not relate to the world at all. It relates only to the Eibishter. So, if you reveal Taimim, which means the level of Torah which relates only to the Eibishter, it's perfect. if you're revealing the Kudus, even though it's a very high level, because it's a level of godliness which is related to the word that you're revealing, it's the beginning of all kind of chesed. So the Rabbi said this: when a person rejoices and delights in the Eibishter's Torah, on the equivalent of the level of taimim, namely the godliness of Torah, which is connected to the Eibishter, there's no relation with the world whatsoever. So Yossi kol minei mibayis hamichutz. There can be no obstacles. And in addition, when you reach the madrega of taimim, which is the highest level of pnimis Torah, the level of Hashem delights in His Torah in a way that has nothing to do with the world. So obviously, it's the very highest level of godliness. But the symptom, the proof, that's the highest level of godliness is that when that level is revealed, no obstacles exist. That's number one. And no matter how low you go, there'll be no ra. Ein ra yeded malmayla klal in this case means no matter how low you descend, if your root, if your beginning is taimei Torah, is simcha tainu gazeh b'teira savaya, there'll be no ra even in the lowest levels. If a person is not holding by the highest level of Torah, taimei Torah, where you're revealing godliness at such a high level that even as it descends to the lowest madregas, there's ein ra. So instead of revealing taimim, which is the highest level, you're revealing the kudus, which are the second level, which is also a wonderful level, but it's not the highest. And because it's not the highest, it's dealing with a level of godliness of Torah, which indirectly at least has a relationship with worldliness. All of Nema, the pasuk says, Vayehi Miketz Shnasayim Yom. If you're not, and I'm going to use my own words now, if you're not connected to Torah, the madrega of Kesed, if you're not connected to the Torah, the madrega of Taimim, so you can be connected to Torah, the madrega of Chochmah and Bina. Or you can be connected to Torah on the madrege of a tainug, a gishmak and Torah, which has a relationship with the world. And Vayehi Miketz Shnasayim Yomim. So here's how it translates the words. That if the level of pnimius, and we're dealing with pnimius, the level of inner rich godliness which you're revealing is only Shnasayim Yomim. It's not the highest madrege, it's the second madrege, so Vayehi Miketz, it's limited. Pirush, Shebechinas Shnasayim Yomim. That the level of Shasayim Yomim, 2 years, Shem Bechinas Yem Yem, in the pasuk Ve'eya Etzle Umen, Ve'eya Etzle Shashuyim Yem Yem. So the highest madrega is Shashuyim Atzmiyim, which corresponds to Taimei Torah. If you're not holding a madrega of Shashuyim Atzmiyim, you're holding a madrega of Shashuyim Yem Yem. Shashuyim Yem Yem is also a very, very high level, but it's not the highest level. It's called Nekudis and not Taimim. So because it's a very high revelation of godliness, but it's not the highest revelation of godliness, you would say that when you descend low enough, Ra can come from it, even though the way it is in its Shadish, Pare, which means to reveal a lakus, is a Moed de Gezach. And now, the delight in godliness, him etzle beketz v'tachas. Vayehi Miketz, it's limited. When you're only holding, you're talking about Pnimius HaTorah, you're holding about Taimei Torah, Tainug of Torah. But if you're only holding a madrega of Taimei Torah, which is called Shnasayim Yomim, it's Vayehi Miketz. It has limits. Kleimar she'ein le bechinas hanal ve'esek HaTorah. He doesn't have the very highest level of Torah, namely Taimei Torah. He only has the second level of Taimei Torah, which is called Yom Yom. Therefore, it's limited. Where are you going to see the chesaron of the fact that you're only holding on the second level of Taimei Torah and not on the highest madrega of Taimei Torah at the end of the road? In the beginning, it's wonderful. Says the pasuk, V'azu parechel. Pare means to reveal godliness. And revealing godliness could be on one level of Avaya, second level of Avaya, third level of Avaya. Says the pasuk, the level of Pnimius HaTorah, the level of godliness being revealed is only Chelem as opposed to Taimei Torah. And Chelem means, in this case, the world of Nekudis, the vowels. Pirush, Dafapish, Yeshlei Bechinas Pare. We're talking about a revelation of Pare. Shubechinas says Galas Alakus, a great revelation of godliness. And the Rebbe says Aidat Tfilis through davening, Afapike nevertheless. Einei Bechinas Taimim. It's not the highest level of Taimei Torah, which is called Simcha and Tainug Gazeh B'Teira Savaya, where we say that Ein Ra Yedid Milmayla, no matter how low it falls, it'll remain ideal. But on this madrege, Nevertheless, it's not the highest level of light and godliness, which is the melody and the delight that the Eibishter has in his Torah, which is totally removed from the world. It's a vowel, and he adds right away Bereisha Asfin, top of the words, top of the letters. And as I told you at the beginning of the class, and you had to start in Vayehi, in Tafresh Ayin Ches, I forgot the name of the Maamar. I think that's the pasuk, but I'm not remembering certainly. You could look up the Maamar. That there's the Nekudas underneath the letters, there's the Nekudas in the middle of the letters, and there's the Nekudas on top of the letters. The Nekudas on top of the letters is the highest Madrege. But the Nekudas on top of the letters is the highest Madrege, but Taimei it's not. There's a level higher. The soul is filled with letters. And that's Chitzenius HaTorah. And on these letters, godly light shines, which is the Madrega of Pnimius. And in the Pnimius of godly light, which is shining on the Eis HaTorah, there's the Madrega of Taimim, the Madrega of the Nekudas, the Madrega of Tagim. And in this case, it's taka above the letters, but it's only a point. In one's mind and soul, there's a flickering, there's a glimmering, a gleaning of the light of godliness. But first of all, it's not the highest level of godliness. And second of all, it's not revealed internally in the person. Indirect. So pari is a moidendika madrege. But since we're dealing with a level of Miketz Nasayim Yomim, that there's only a level of Yem Yem, Shashuim Yem Yem, as opposed to Shashuim Atzmiyim, therefore the Gili of pari is only Chaleim, only Nekudas above Asius, and not time. In other words, as lofty as Chaloim is. We're dealing with Nekudas, and Nekudas are higher than Asius and higher than Tagim. Moreover, Nekudas themselves, we're talking about Nekudas which are above the Asius, as opposed to Nekudas which are in the Asius, or Nekudas which are beneath the Asius. Afal Pekain, Taimei Teire it isn't. And therefore the pasuk continues, V'hine Eimed Ala Yair. Pari says, I'm standing higher than the river. What does that mean? The river is the source of the 7 fat cows, the good cows. And the 7 good cows, it's the emotions of love and fear which are natural, which will continue after one davens. And that machmazeh, on the basis of these feelings which are sustained after the davening, you live your life practically as you're supposed to, in not sinning and doing the right thing. So you're you're standing on the river. Standing on the river means you're standing on the source of the emotions which are the basis of good actions. So it's like Val de Kazach, Pare Chelim. You're revealing the level of Pnimius HaTorah associated with Nekudas which are above the Asius. You're a master of the emotions which are revealed, which affect good behavior. Says the Rebbe, what does it say in the next pasuk? The 7 rich cows, which represent the midas of Teva Velakus, which bring you to do Yiddishkeit, are followed by 7 other cows. The second set of cows, which are from Klippa, swallow up the first set of cows, which are from midas of Kedusha. You can't even see that they were swallowed. What does that mean? Way after one davens from the midas avas Hashem and yiras Hashem of the davening, which is Parshas Teves, yuchal say that midas Teves gashmias. There can also be emotions and desires for physical things that are mishakhes legamri v'leinedak yebo el kabena. They make totally to forget as midas Teves ava v'yira v'chola, the good measure of midas, which is love and fear shebesh asat tefillah during the duration of the davening itself. So here's the sequence. There's a Ya'ir. And the Ya'ir is a high level. I guess in Kabbalah the Ya'ir is Bina. From the Ya'ir there's going to be Paras which goes on the Midas. And the Midas affect actions. If this Ya'ir is exactly the way it's supposed to be, it can only produce good cows. It can only produce the kind of Midas which are going to make you do Torah mitzvahs. If from that Ya'ir can evolve after the good cows, bad cows, it's not a proof that at the end of the line there is something negative. It's proof that at the beginning of the line there was the beginning of a negativity which would show itself at the end of the line. Where does it begin? Parei Chelim. That the only level of Pnimius that's being revealed is Chalaim, is Nekudas, higher than Asius, and not Taimim. Why? Because we're dealing with Nasayim Yomim, which is Mikeitz. If you reveal the highest level of Pnimius HaTorah, then The lowest levels in this world is still Kedusha. If you're revealing Pnimis of Elokus on a very high level, but it's not the highest level, it's only Shnasayim Yamim, which is Miketz, and therefore it's Parei Chalaim. In the end of the day, it's not only that from Eimad Alayir you're going to have Parshas HaTevis, it's going to devolve into Parshas Erois. And the Rebbe says in line 167, Masha'en Ken Bechinas HaTaimim, as opposed to when you reveal the highest level of Pnimis HaTeira, which is the melody, the Taimim. Shu Bechinas Shira V'Zimon al the music. Al Zeh Amar the Gemara says Kol Eithik B'Teira B'Layla. When a person learns Taira even when it's dark, godliness reveals itself to him in his darkness. There's a thread of kindness which is drawn down to him by Deisha Neman. During day Hashem gives us his kindness. When we sing his song, we're also with him. The thread of kindness and supernal love. Love brings down upon him a new love, which is even more than the nature of his godly soul to be attached to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What's the proof that there is integrity and absoluteness in this Ava, that it's Balayla? That even Balayla you're imi. Umisham, and if a Yid is in a state of Parei, not Chelim, but Parei Taimim, however you say the Pasuk, because it's not Shnasayim Yamim, which is Miketz, but it's Tainuga Atzmi, which is Parei revealing the highest level, then the Yo'er is not going to bring to Sheva Parshas Harois, just Parshas HaTevis. Umisham nimshach Yo'er, and from this level you have a Yo'er. And it brings down a point to it brings down a godliness to the Nekuda of the letters in such a way that they won't be Parshas Harois. That the river is above the Nekuda. In other words, that you're revealing timing. Drawing down an incredible radiation of light. And as a consequence, at the lowest level, there's not going to be midas rois. When you're holding by time Teira, so what you have here is an exquisite and unusual interpretation of Psukim. The essence of it is the same, that Chalaim is not so perfect. And because Chalaim is not so perfect, all kinds of things unfold. But normally we would associate these psukim to a dream, which is associated with Golus. Here we're associated with the highest levels of Pnimius HaTeira. Not then it's not the highest. And so long as it's not the highest, there's a Riba Ishtalshlos to Sheva Parshas Harois. And we'll do the beer of the Maamar the next week.